When's the last time you performed a self-examination? Listen, I'm not a doctor, I don't play one on TV, and I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. A reference to an old TV commercial some of you may be familiar with. So we are not going to be talking about medical self-examinations. Those are good things to do under the guidance of a medical professional. But that's not our topic today. Rather, we're going to be talking about a spiritual self-examination. When was the last time you performed a spiritual self-examination? And maybe your response is that you don't need to. You know you are a Christian. You know that you're a pretty good person. You know that you regularly attend church. You do more than just attend on Sunday morning. You actually participate in some of the church's other programs and activities. So there's really no need to do a self-examination. Thank you very much, but I'm fine. Well, are you? Let's turn to the Bible and look at the instruction to perform a self-examination. In 2 Corinthians 13:5, Paul tells the saints in Corinth this: examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves. Paul didn't write this to the average person on the street. He didn't write this to the general public. He wrote this to the saints in the church. And he tells them to examine themselves, to test themselves. And he tells them the purpose of this examination: to see if you are in the faith, to see if you have put your trust and reliance on God. Because that's what faith is. You respond by saying that you're now even more convinced that you don't need to do this self-examination. Because one thing you are certain of is that you are in the faith. You believe in God. You're in good standing with your church. You are clearly in the faith. No need to do a self-examination. Well, you may be right. I hope you are right. But I want to encourage you to do a spiritual self-examination. And I want to use two brief Bible passages to convince you that you should. The first passage is found in Revelation chapter 3. Verses 14 through 22 record the letter that Jesus had John write to the church in Laodicea. This is the letter that speaks of a lukewarm church. But we're going to look at what Jesus says right after his lukewarm comment in verse 17. In verse 17, Jesus says this to the saints in Laodicea: "For you say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing, not realizing that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked." You see, they said, we're good. We have everything we need. But Jesus said, no, you're not. You're actually wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. They thought they were fine, but they weren't. They could have helped themselves by doing a candid self-assessment. The second passage is found in Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 22, where Jesus says this: "On that day many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And then will I declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me." Sounds a lot like what we just looked at in Revelation. They thought they were all good. After all, they were doing things, church things, mighty works, as they self-describe it. But here again, we find that they're out of step with Jesus. He doesn't compliment them. He doesn't give them a thumbs up and say, well done. Quite the opposite. He tells them, depart from me, I never knew you. They thought they were fine. They weren't. They weren't fine at all. Perhaps they should have done some examining of themselves, some testing of themselves to see if they really were in the faith. Perhaps they would have heard a different message from Jesus if they had taken the time to look in the mirror, to have examined themselves, to have tested themselves. In our society, it's really easy to be comfortable in our church attendance, to refer to ourselves as Christians, to adhere to our church traditions, to go through the motions. But are we really in the faith? Are we even willing to ask that question of ourselves? Paul warns the saints in Corinth to examine themselves. And I believe the words from Jesus found in Revelation and Matthew ought to make that clear, that that is some really, really good advice. Perhaps we also need to do a self-examination to test ourselves. I hope these words both encourage you and challenge you. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.